Last time we ranked the mountains where the road itself is out to get you. This one goes underground. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles over a cab the moment the daylight cuts off and the walls close in on both sides. No shoulder, no ditch, no exit, just you, 80,000 pounds, and a concrete tube with one way out. Every driver who's run this country long enough has a tunnel that made his hands tighten on the wheel, and tonight we're putting 20 of them in order from bad to the worst in America. Nobody assigned these rankings. They got voted in over 50 years of scraped trailers, melted tiles, and CB warnings passed down like scripture. And we backed everyone with hard numbers, fire reports, and state data. Some of these will try to peel your roof off. One of them you share with a moving train. And waiting at the very top is a tunnel so feared that the loads too dangerous to send through it get exiled over an 11,000-foot pass instead. And the drivers hauling them will tell you the detour is the scarier half of the deal. Let's get into it. The Cumberland Gap Tunnel starts this list, and it starts here for the same reason the Schoolhouse Hill did last time. It's the teacher. This is the twin bore that carries US 25E under the mountain where Kentucky hands you to Tennessee, and by any modern measure, it's one of the safest tunnels you'll ever run. Bright, wide, staffed around the clock by a crew of nearly 40 people trained to fight fire and pull you out of a wreck. So why does it earn a spot? Because of what it replaced. Before this tunnel opened in October of 1996, US 25E climbed 2.3 miles straight over the top of the gap on a winding, narrow crossing that locals stopped calling by its name. They called it Massacre Mountain, and they earned the name at a rate of roughly 8 to 10 dead every single year. The federal government spent about $280 million boring twin tubes through solid rock, hitting underground streams and caverns along the way, specifically to take drivers off that killer grade. The cost of Cumberland Gap, in other words, is a history lesson. This is the tunnel that exists because the alternative was body counts. Every safe tube on this list is somebody's answer to a road that used to kill people. Cumberland Gap just wears its receipts on the outside. Big Walker Mountain Tunnel is next, up on Interstate 77 in Southwest Virginia, and it teaches the second lesson every tunnel driver needs. A tunnel is only as good as the road leading into it. Big Walker is a bore measuring 4,229 feet under the mountain, opened in 1972 with a 3.5% uphill grade to the north. On a clear day, it's a beautiful piece of engineering. The trouble is what stacks up at the mouth of it. When a storm hits this corridor, the tunnel becomes a cork. Back in one March blizzard, traffic backed up so badly that hundreds of drivers spent the storm stranded inside and around the Big Walker tube in Bland County with nowhere to go. That's the mechanism up here. A tunnel can't be salted, can't be plowed, and can't grow a shoulder when 40 trucks pile up at the portal in the ice. The cost of Big Walker is the clock. You climb the grade, you hit the backup, and you sit in the dark, burning fuel while your delivery window turns into a memory. Fuel in Wytheville and check the weather before you commit to the mountain, because once you're in the approach, there's no clever way out of it. 20 miles up the same interstate sits the East River Mountain Tunnel, and this one shows you what a fire looks like when it's got nowhere to go. At 5,412 feet, it's the longer of the two I-77 tubes, and it carries a strange distinction. It's one of only 2 land vehicle tunnels in America that cross a state line, punching through the mountain from Virginia into West Virginia. That state line matters more than it sounds, because when things go wrong, 2 states' worth of fire departments have to sort out who's coming, and things have gone wrong. A tractor-trailer caught fire inside this tunnel in the summer of 2014, and did so much damage that VDOT was still replacing the lighting years later. Go back to a motorhome fire in the 1990s, and the flames blocked both lanes, burning so hot that tiles popped off the walls, while firefighters could only push about 600 feet into the smoke before the heat drove them back out. That's the reason Virginia now keeps dedicated fire trucks stationed at these tubes. The cost of East River Mountain is the confined burn. A fire in the open air rises and clears. A fire in a tunnel just fills the tube with heat and poison and waits for you. Respect the no wide loads signs here because they were written in soot. Now drop all the way down to the Gulf Coast because the Bankhead Tunnel in Mobile, Alabama might be the most quietly dangerous tunnel on this list, and it'll get you before you ever reach it. Opened in 1941, this narrow little tube under the Mobile River was built for the cars of the Roosevelt era, which means a modern rig does not fit. Cars and pickups only. Large trucks are supposed to be nowhere near it. The problem is that your GPS doesn't know that. Drivers have watched navigation units route big trucks straight into the mouth of the Bankhead for decades, and the portal wears the scars to prove it. One year, a factory-new Prevost motor coach getting hauled cross-country ended up with its nose wedged about 15 feet into the opening. The cost of the Bankhead is the trust you put in the little voice on your dash. It doesn't know your height. It doesn't know your route restrictions. It just knows the shortest line on a map, and in Mobile that line ends with your hood stuck in a 1941 tunnel and traffic backed up behind you into downtown. If you're running Interstate 10 through Mobile, ignore the shortcut and stay on the interstate. Which brings us to the tunnel the interstate actually uses. The George Wallace Tunnel is that one, the twin I-10 tubes that dive 40 feet under the Mobile River, and it earns its spot with a design flaw that never goes away. The entrance is curved, sharply, and that curve, taken at speed by a high truck, is exactly where things tip. Locals will tell you 2 separate rollover deaths came from 2 tiered cattle trailers where the load shifted on that angled entry and put the truck over onto the car beside it. In a single year, the tunnel logged more than 300 accidents. Add that it's the choke point at the end of the Bayway, a 6.2-mile causeway with almost no ramps, and you get backups running 3 hours long, the kind of trap you cannot escape when a hurricane evacuation is trying to move a whole coast through 2 tubes at once. Hazmat isn't even allowed through. The cost of the Wallace is the curve and the crowd. You're breaking blind into a bend, in traffic, underwater, with a coast full of Florida-bound vacationers packed around you. Take the entry slow and don't run beside a tall trailer through the bend. Let me grab one thing before Pennsylvania. If this list is saving you even one scraped roof, hit subscribe. It's free, and unlike your GPS, it will never once try to steer you into a tunnel built for a Model T. Pittsburgh calls itself the City of Tunnels, and it means it, so we're making 3 stops here. Start with the Liberty Tunnel, the Liberty Tubes, opened back in 1924 and built for a world that drove a lot slower than we do. The one iron rule down here is the one drivers brake constantly. You do not change lanes inside a Pittsburgh tunnel. PennDOT's own engineers say it plainly. There's no room to maneuver out of the way of an errant vehicle in these tubes. A single lane change in the Liberty has put cars into the wall, flipped, and spun. The cost of the Liberty is claustrophobia with no margin. You get one line through, everybody around you has to hold theirs, and the moment somebody doesn't, there's nowhere for anyone to go. The Squirrel Hill Tunnel is the second Pittsburgh stop out on the Parkway East, and its problem is a specific missing thing: shoulders. At 4,225 feet, opened in 1953, This tube carries a punishing daily load with no breakdown lane to speak of, which means one stall, one fender bender, one nervous driver tapping the brakes, and the whole thing seizes. Pittsburgh drivers even have a name for the phantom slowdown that grips this tunnel for no visible reason, where 100 cars brake at a ghost. The cost of Squirrel Hill is the standstill. A tunnel with no shoulder can't absorb a single mistake, so every mistake becomes everybody's mistake. The Fort Pitt Tunnel is the third, and it's the one out-of-towners never forget because of what waits on the other side. Opened in 1960 and carrying nearly 100,000 vehicles a day, the Fort Pitt is Pittsburgh's busiest tube, and it doesn't just dump you into the city, it dumps you straight onto the Fort Pitt Bridge with the downtown skyline exploding into view, and about 2 seconds to decide whether you want downtown, the South Side, Station Square, or Route 51. Miss your lane, and you're taking an unplanned tour of the city, boxed in by semis and locals who position themselves correctly before the tunnel and lean on the horn at anybody who didn't. The cost of the Fort Pitt is the ambush exit. Every other tunnel lets you breathe when you come out. This one hands you a bridge, a skyline, and a four-way decision all at once, and your GPS calls out, "Keep right," about a half second after it stopped mattering. Know your lane before you go in, because there's no fixing it after. Now on to the Pennsylvania Turnpike, where the tunnels are a different animal, and the Tuscarora Mountain Tunnel makes the list on fire. This is a 1.1-mile bore, one of the 4 original Turnpike tunnels still working, and the Turnpike's tunnels carry a specific curse in their DNA. When the road was first built, the wide lanes pinched down to about 11.5 feet inside the tubes, single file, one each way. They've been widened since, but the reputation stuck for a reason. In 2002, an eastbound tractor-trailer crashed into the wall of the westbound portal here, touched off a fire, and damage to the roadway and the tunnel forced the Turnpike to shut down completely between 2 interchanges, routing everybody, cars and trucks alike, off onto other interstates. The cost of Tuscarora is the total shutdown. When a truck burns in one of these old mountain tubes, there's no lane to squeeze past, no shoulder to work around. The mountain closes, and a huge slice of cross-state freight has to find another way over the Alleghenies. The Allegheny Mountain Tunnel is the Turnpike's worst, and the numbers explain why. It's the longest tunnel still in active use on the whole Turnpike, built in the 1940s, and it is now handling roughly double the traffic it was ever designed for. Twin tubes, no shoulders, carrying Interstate 70 and 76 through the Eastern Continental Divide. When a vehicle breaks down or crashes inside, there's no room to move it, so the whole thing goes to a crawl or a dead stop. And here's the detail that tells you how outdated it is. Trucks carrying certain hazardous materials aren't even allowed through the Allegheny tube, so they get kicked off the Turnpike entirely and routed onto small local community roads that were never built for them. The state's fix is telling. Rather than modernize the tunnel, the Turnpike is now studying a plan to blast a 250-foot deep open cut clean through the top of the mountain and abandon the tubes altogether, a project pushing past $300 million. The cost of the Allegheny is age. It's a 1940s tunnel doing 2020's work, and everyone from the trucker to the Turnpike Commission knows it's living on borrowed time. The Zion Mount Carmel Tunnel earns its place by being the tunnel that says no. Out on Utah's SR9, this 1.1-mile bore was carved through the sandstone in the late 1920s and never grew up. It's so tight, so curved, and so dark, with no lights at all inside, that a federal study found large vehicles literally can't get through without crossing the center line. So semis are flat out banned, and so is anything hauling hazmat. For years, oversized RVs could buy a permit and get walked through one lane at a time by a ranger, but even that's ending, with the park shutting the door on big vehicles entirely as of the summer of 2026. The cost of Zion isn't a wreck. It's the wall you hit before you ever get there. Some tubes make you nervous. This one just tells commercial trucks to turn around, and it's been right to. The Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel is the strangest entry on this list, and one of the most nerve-wracking because you don't share it with other trucks. You share it with a train. Out in Alaska, this 2.5-mile passage to the port town of Whittier is the longest highway tunnel in North America, and it's a single lane that carries cars, trucks, and a live railroad all in both directions, taking turns. Built by the military in 1943 and rebuilt for cars around the turn of the century, it's engineered for temperatures 40 degrees below zero and winds of 150 miles per hour, with jet turbines that have to air the tube out between runs. You drive directly over the rail line on a single-lane road through the heart of a 4,000-foot mountain on a schedule, and if you miss your window, you wait for the next opening. The cost of the Anton Anderson is the loss of control. You go when the tunnel says go, you go one direction at a time, and for 2.5 miles, you are threading a moving train's tunnel in the dark, with no room and no oncoming lane. As the facility's own manager put it, a fire in there isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you're hauling to Whittier, you plan your whole day around that tunnel's clock, because it does not plan around yours. Back to the big city and the Holland Tunnel, where the story is simple. This one wasn't built for you at all. Opened in 1927 under the Hudson between New Jersey and Manhattan, the Holland has a height limit of just 12 feet 6 inches and bans tractor trailers and anything with 4 or more axles outright. Send your rig in there and you're in the wrong place. And the reason the rules are that strict is written in one of the ugliest tunnel fires in American history. On a Friday morning in 1949, a truck illegally carrying 80 drums of carbon disulfide caught fire deep inside the Holland. One drum broke loose, cracked open, and the vapor lit off a blaze that injured 66 people and killed a firefighter. The cost of the Holland is the reminder that these underwater tubes take hazardous cargo about as well as a submarine takes a match. If you're in a straight truck that fits, know your placard's cold, because this tunnel has already shown exactly what one wrong load can do underground. The Lincoln Tunnel is the Holland's bigger, meaner sibling, and it earns its spot with a trap that catches drivers every year. Height: 3 tubes under the Hudson, a 13-foot ceiling, most hazmat banned, and the center tube closed to trucks entirely. And drivers still misjudge it. In 2007, a trucker whose rig was just 6 inches too tall drove the entire 1.5-mile length of the Lincoln anyway, peeling the roof clean off his trailer and ripping down the decorative ceiling tiles the whole way, even after flashing signs and officers on a loudspeaker tried to wave him off. He rolled out the far side with 9 misdemeanor charges. When a truck does scrape that ceiling and stops, the fix is its own kind of humbling. The Port Authority lets the air out of the tires so they can back the rig out. The cost of the Lincoln is 6 inches. That's the whole margin. 6 inches between a normal shift and 1.5 miles of tearing metal. You can't stop because you can't back up. Know your real height, not your guessed height, because this tunnel does not forgive the difference. Half of you have been waiting for open water, so let's get exposed. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel is 17.6 miles of roadway across the mouth of the Chesapeake, dipping into tubes under 2 shipping channels, and it's one of the few crossings on Earth where the wind can simply pick your truck up and throw it into the sea. The bridge tunnel runs 6 escalating levels of wind restriction, starting at 40 miles an hour and climbing until at 65, only cars are allowed, and past that the whole thing shuts. And empty trailers are the worst off, because as the crossing's own study found, trailers keep getting lighter every year, which makes them easier for the wind to flip. This is not theoretical. In 2017, a tractor-trailer went off the span into the frigid bay and the driver died despite a Navy helicopter rescue. By the district's count, 12 vehicles have gone off that crossing since it opened in 1964, and 10 of those drivers didn't survive. The cost of the CBBT is total exposure. 17 miles over open salt water, where a crosswind, a light trailer, and one nervous swerve are all it takes. Check the wind level before you commit, and if they're waving empties off, they're waving you off for a reason. And if this list has your attention now, tap that like button. The algorithm treats it the way the wind treats an empty reefer. It acts like it doesn't notice, right up until it moves you. The Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is the CBBT's angrier cousin, the I-64 crossing that plunges under the water between Hampton and Norfolk, and it makes this list as the pure choke point. 2 lanes each way, no shoulders, no escape, jammed with some of the busiest traffic in Virginia, and it catches fire with a regularity that should bother you. In 2016, 2 cars burned in the eastbound tube and filled it with so much smoke that around 80 people had to abandon their vehicles and evacuate on foot. In 2019, an 8-vehicle pileup in there involved a tractor-trailer that was hauling hazardous materials. Truck fires, car fires, and speed-fueled wrecks have shut this tunnel down over and over, and because there's no shoulder, a single incident stops everything cold. The cost of the HRBT is the confined chain reaction. You're in a 2-lane tube under a river with no way around the car in front of you, so the moment one of them catches, everybody behind is trapped in the smoke with them. They're spending billions widening this crossing precisely because the current one has no room to fail safely. Until it's done, the rule here is boring and correct. Leave following distance you'll never regret, because you cannot swerve your way out of this one. The Caldecott Tunnel is where this list stops being about scraped roofs and starts being about lives, because the Caldecott is home to one of the deadliest tunnel fires in American history. On California's State Route 24 between Oakland and Orinda, just after midnight on April 7, 1982, a drunk driver stalled her car in the northernmost bore, a tube that runs downhill at nearly 5%. A gasoline tanker hauling 8,800 gallons came down that grade behind her, couldn't stop in time, and slammed into the stalled car. A bus hit the tanker overturned, the gasoline spilled and pooled and found the drainage channels, and then it ignited. 7 people burned to death inside that tunnel. The fire was so intense it flattened the tanker to about 6 inches high. That one night rewrote how California handles hazmat on the road. The cost of the Caldecott is the worst case made real: a flammable load, a downhill grade, a stalled vehicle, and a confined tube, all lining up in the dark. It's the exact combination every hazmat routing rule on the rest of this list is written to prevent. And the Caldecott is the tunnel that proved why they're needed. Which takes us to Baltimore, the runner-up region on this whole list, because right now, these tunnels are carrying a burden they were never meant to hold. Start with the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel. The I-895 crossing opened back in 1957. Like every serious harbor tube, it bans the dangerous stuff. Bottled propane over a small limit, bulk gasoline, explosives, radioactive loads. What's not normal is what happened on March 26, 2024, when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. That bridge was the hazmat route around the harbor. With it gone, every hazmat truck that used to cross it got forced onto a 30-plus mile detour around the Western Beltway because it still can't legally use the tunnels. The Harbor Tunnel and its neighbor absorbed most of the bridge's traffic overnight, and planners described the crossings as getting slammed. The cost here is the overload. A 1957 tube doing the work of a collapsed bridge on top of its own, packed tighter every month. And the runner-up itself is the Fort McHenry Tunnel, the I-95 crossing that opened in 1985 and is now the single most loaded harbor tube in the region, because it's absorbing the same collapsed bridge traffic while the same hazmat ban creates a genuinely frightening problem. Here's the mechanism, and it's the reason this one sits so high. That 30-plus mile detour costs a hazmat driver time and fuel he doesn't get paid for. So according to reporting out of Baltimore, some of them are making a dark calculation. They're pulling the hazardous materials placards off their trucks and running the Fort McHenry and Harbor tunnels illegally, which means first responders now have no idea what's actually rolling through the tube next to you. Police are on alert. Experts warned of a perfect storm as the reopened port pushes thousands more containers through those tubes. The cost of the Fort McHenry is the load you can't see. Every other tunnel on this list at least tells you what's around you. This one has drivers deliberately hiding what they're hauling to save a few miles, which turns a normal run under the harbor into a gamble with a stranger's placards. That's a runner-up you can feel. And the heavy hitter is next, so subscribe if you haven't. Fuel already took your money, and the Key Bridge detour already took your afternoon. The least I can do is hand you a free list of tubes not to burn up in. The most feared tunnel in America for a trucker sits at the top of the continent's interstate system, and its name is the Eisenhower-Johnson Memorial Tunnel. This is the I-70 crossing of the Continental Divide in Colorado, and it holds a title no other tunnel can touch. At 11,158 feet, the West Portal is the single highest point on the entire interstate highway system. You climb 7% grades from the west and 6% from the east just to reach it, more than 2 miles up, where the weather flips in minutes and the chain law becomes a way of life. But the reason it tops this list is the same reason Loveland Pass topped so many nightmares on our last countdown, because the two are chained together. Placarded hazmat is banned from the Eisenhower Tunnel year-round. Every single day, roughly 200 hazmat trucks get turned away from the safe, enclosed tube and sent instead up and over Loveland Pass, that exposed 11,990-foot monster of switchbacks you met on our roads list. The loads too dangerous for the tunnel get assigned to the more dangerous road, and the drivers don't get a vote. It only gets worse in winter. When Loveland closes for weather, Colorado has to stop all traffic, escort the waiting hazmat loads through the tunnel alone, and then reopen. The state takes the fire risk here so seriously, it spent $25 million on a water deluge system built, not even to put a fire out, but just to cool the tube enough that firefighters can get close. 7 workers died boring this tunnel through the divide in the first place. So what does the Eisenhower actually cost a driver? Everything this countdown has shown you, stacked into one place 2 miles above sea level. The altitude, the hazmat exile of Baltimore, the grade of Big Walker, the fire risk of East River Mountain, and the cruel joke that the safe option and the scary option are welded together. So half the trucks approaching it get shunted onto the exact pass their equipment feared most. Every list has a worst. This tunnel and the pass it exiles you to earned it together. If your load is clean, run the tube with your traction ready and your temperature gauge honest. If your load is placarded, you already know you're not going through, you're going over. And that's the whole reason drivers whisper about this one. So that's the 20. From a history lesson under Cumberland Gap all the way up to the highest, meanest tube on the interstate system with a pass strapped to its back. Notice the pattern the whole list kept whispering. The tunnel almost never gets you with one trick. It's the grade plus the fire, the height plus the overconfidence, the ban plus the driver who strips his placards to beat the detour. And the ones who get in trouble are usually the ones who trusted the little voice on the dash over the signs at the portal. Now it's your turn. Drop the tunnel that made your hands tighten in the comments, the tube or the crossing where you learned something the hard way because somebody running it tomorrow hasn't learned it yet. And if this list is riding shotgun for you now, subscribe. It's still about the only thing left in trucking that's free. Until next time, keep the rubber side down, the shiny side up, and check your height before the portal.